She collapsed at work. Doctors confirmed she was pregnant. The CEO asked one question. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories like this one. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The conference room on the 42nd floor is silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning. Floor-to-ceiling windows frame the city skyline, steel and glass stretching for miles. Around the long walnut table sit senior executives in tailored suits, tablets glowing, coffee cooling untouched. At the head of the table stands Ethan Cole, the chief executive officer of Cole Industries, a man known for precision, restraint, and absolute control. He is mid-sentence, outlining a merger that could shift the market by billions of dollars when it happens. A chair scrapes softly, then another sound, a dull, unmistakable thud. Every head turns. Across the room, near the far end of the table, a young woman crumples to the floor. Her name is Lily Hart. One moment she is standing with her notepad held tight against her chest. The next, she is unconscious, dark hair spilling across the marble tiles, her face drained of color. For half a second, no one moves. Shock freezes the room. Then Ethan steps forward. Call an ambulance, now. His voice cuts through the silence, calm but commanding. Someone fumbles for a phone. Another executive kneels beside Lily, calling her name, panic rising. Ethan is already there, crouching down, his suit jacket brushing the floor, his eyes fixed on her pale face. She does not respond. Within minutes, paramedics rush in, a stretcher rolling across the polished floor. The meeting is forgotten. The deal, the numbers, the future projections, all dissolve into the background as Lily is lifted carefully and wheeled out. Ethan follows. The private medical suite at the office is bright and sterile, smelling faintly of antiseptic. Monitors beep softly as a doctor checks Lily's vitals. Ethan stands a few feet away, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. To anyone watching, he looks like the concerned head of a company, nothing more. But his eyes do not leave her. The doctor straightens, glancing at the chart, then at Ethan. She is stable, he says, but there is something else you should know. Ethan nods once. Go on. The doctor lowers his voice, professional but serious. She fainted due to a combination of exhaustion, dehydration, and stress. And she is pregnant. The word lands heavily in the room. Pregnant. For a brief moment, even the steady beeping of the monitor seems too loud. Ethan does not react right away. His face remains composed, as it always is. But something shifts behind his eyes, something tight and dangerous. Pregnant, he repeats quietly. Yes, the doctor confirms. Early stages. She likely did not even know yet. Ethan takes a slow breath. His gaze moves back to Lily, unconscious, vulnerable in a way he has never allowed himself to see her before. She is not just an assistant now, not just a name on a contract, not just someone who fit conveniently into a carefully controlled arrangement. His jaw tightens. When he finally speaks, his voice is low, steady, and directed only at the doctor. Is that child mine? The question hangs in the air, unanswered, as the city continues to move far below the windows, unaware that everything in this room has just changed. The truth is, Lily Hart was never supposed to be in that conference room. Not really. She stood there every week, quietly taking notes, tracking action items, anticipating needs before they were spoken. But she was invisible by design. An assistant on a short-term executive support contract. No title worth remembering, no last name anyone bothered to learn, beyond what was printed on her badge. And that was exactly how it had to be, because Lily could not afford to be seen. 3 months earlier, she had nearly lost everything. Rent in downtown Chicago had gone up again. Her savings were already gone, drained by her mother's medical bills back in Indiana. Her previous job ended without warning when the company downsized, and unemployment barely covered groceries. When the offer from Cole Industries arrived, it felt like a lifeline. 6 months, confidential role, high pressure, excellent pay, no questions asked. She signed the contract the same night. What Lily did not know then was how completely the job would consume her. 12-hour days, meetings that started before sunrise and ended long after dark. Meals skipped because there was always one more email to answer, one more document to prepare. She told herself she was strong enough, that she had to be. There was no room for weakness, no room for mistakes, especially not now. Because if the truth came out, everything would unravel. Ethan Cole understood risk better than anyone in that building. As Chief Executive Officer of Cole Industries, his life was governed by timing, perception, and control. Every public appearance was calculated, every relationship scrutinized. The board trusted him because he never allowed personal matters to interfere with business. And right now, the company was standing on a fault line. The merger he had been presenting moments before Lily collapsed was not just another deal. It was the deal. A multi-billion-dollar consolidation that would determine the company's future for the next decade. Investors were watching. The board was divided. One scandal, one whisper of instability, could collapse months of negotiation overnight. Ethan knew this, which was why the doctor's words echoed in his mind with such dangerous clarity. She is pregnant. He had not reacted in the room, not outwardly. He had learned long ago that silence often carried more power than anger. But inside, calculations were already forming, precise and merciless. If Lily was pregnant, and if the child was his, the implications were immediate. A subordinate, a private arrangement, a child conceived outside of any sanctioned relationship. The press would tear it apart, the board would demand answers, and Lily would be destroyed first. Ethan looked through the glass wall of the medical suite, watching as a nurse adjusted the blanket around Lily's shoulders. She stirred slightly but did not wake. For the first time since he had met her, she looked small, vulnerable, not the composed, efficient woman who always stood 2 steps behind him with a tablet in hand. And that unsettled him more than he expected. What no one else in that building knew was that Lily and Ethan already shared a secret. It had begun as a solution, nothing more. 3 months ago, on a night when negotiations had stalled and pressure from the board was closing in, Ethan had needed someone he could trust, someone discreet, someone with nothing to gain by talking. Lily had been there. One conversation turned into another. A drink that was supposed to last 10 minutes turned into hours. 2 people, both exhausted, both carrying more weight than they admitted, made a decision that felt contained in that moment. No promises, no expectations, no future. They had agreed on that. Afterward, nothing changed. At least on the surface. Lily returned to her role. Ethan returned to his world. No messages, no acknowledgement. Professional distance restored, or so Ethan believed. Now, standing outside the medical suite, he realized how fragile that illusion had been, because Lily had carried the consequences alone. And if this pregnancy became public, she would be the one judged, blamed, and discarded. The nurse stepped out and nodded to Ethan. She will wake up soon. Ethan straightened his jacket, his expression settling back into the calm authority the world expected from him. But before he moved, he made a decision. Whatever happened next, this would not be handled in public, not in a boardroom, not in the media, and not without his control. Because one way or another, the arrangement that had once protected them both was about to be rewritten. And this time, it would not be simple. Lily woke slowly, as if surfacing from deep water. At first, there was only light, too bright. Then sound followed, soft but persistent. The steady rhythm of a heart monitor, the low murmur of voices beyond the glass wall. She tried to move and felt the weight of a blanket, the unfamiliar stiffness of a medical bed. Her throat was dry. She opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was smooth and white, nothing like the gray cubicle walls she was used to. For one terrifying second, she did not know where she was. Then memory rushed back, all at once. The conference room, the long table, Ethan's voice mid-sentence, the sudden dizziness that had rolled through her body like a wave, the fall. Her heart began to race. She pushed herself up slightly, wincing as a dull ache spread behind her eyes. Almost immediately, the door opened. A nurse stepped in, her expression calm and practiced. "Easy," the nurse said gently. "You fainted. You are safe." Lily swallowed. "My meeting," she began, then stopped, realizing how absurd that sounded. The nurse smiled faintly. "Your work can wait. There is something we need to talk about first. A cold knot formed in Lily's stomach. She already knew. The doctor came in moments later, carrying a chart. He spoke carefully, explaining the dehydration, the exhaustion, the stress. Lily nodded through it all, barely listening. Then came the part she could not escape. "You are pregnant," he said. The word hit her chest like a physical blow. Pregnant. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly, as if that might make it less real. She had suspected it weeks ago, the nausea in the mornings, the fatigue that sleep never fixed, but she had ignored it. There had never been a good time to know the truth. Now the truth had found her anyway. The doctor explained timelines, weeks, next steps. Lily heard only fragments. When he finished, he gave her a moment alone. As soon as the door closed, Lily pressed her hands over her face. This was not part of the plan. Nothing about this was supposed to exist beyond that one night. 3 months earlier, everything had felt controlled, predictable. She remembered it clearly. The quiet bar across from the office, the lights low, the city humming outside. Ethan had looked tired that night. Not the untouchable executive everyone feared, but a man worn down by responsibility. They had talked, really talked, about pressure, about expectations, about how lonely it was to carry weight no one else could see. It had felt human. What followed was not reckless. It was careful, deliberate. Two adults making a decision they believed would end when the night did. They had agreed on rules. No attachment, no claims, no consequences. She had believed him when he said it would stay contained. And for a while, it had. Until it did not. The door opened again. Lily looked up, and her breath caught. Ethan stood there. Not in a boardroom, not behind a desk. Just a few feet away, his hands at his sides, his expression guarded. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lily straightened, instinctively pulling the blanket higher, as if it could shield her from what was coming. "You should not be here," she said quietly. Ethan closed the door behind him. "I needed to see you." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Congratulations, you have." Silence stretched between them, the kind filled with things unsaid. "The doctor told me," Ethan said at last. Lily nodded once. "I assumed he would." His gaze dropped briefly to her abdomen, then returned to her face. The question he had asked earlier still hung between them, unanswered. "Is it mine?" he asked again, softer this time. Lily held his eyes. "Yes." The word landed with finality. Ethan did not react immediately. He did not deny it. He did not argue. He simply absorbed it, as if recalculating everything he thought he knew. "This changes things," he said. Lily's voice hardened. "It changes my life. Yours will survive just fine." That was the moment Ethan realized something else the contract had never accounted for. Whatever control he thought he had before was already gone, and the next decision he made would not be about business. It would be about responsibility. The room felt smaller once the truth was spoken. Lily lay back against the pillows, her hands folded tightly in her lap, as if holding herself together required physical effort. Ethan stood near the window, looking out at the city below, giving her space she did not ask for, but silently appreciated. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally, Ethan turned. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said. Lily let out a slow breath. "I already know what happens next," she replied. "I take responsibility for my child. I do not expect anything from you." Ethan frowned slightly. "That is not what I meant." She looked at him then, really looked at him, searching his face for the man she had known that night, not the executive the world feared. "What did you mean?" He stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance from the bed. "What I mean is that this situation cannot be handled emotionally. Not yet. There are too many variables, too many consequences." Lily's eyes narrowed. "You were talking like this is a market problem. I am talking like this is reality," Ethan said evenly. "If this becomes public in the wrong way, the fallout will not just affect me. It will affect you, and it will affect the child." That word again, child. Lily swallowed. "Then what do you suggest?" Ethan hesitated. For the first time since she had met him, he seemed uncertain. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more deliberate. "We create a structure." Her heart sank. "A structure. A formal arrangement," he continued. "One that protects you from scrutiny and gives the company stability. one that ensures the child grows up without being treated like a scandal. Lily stared at him, disbelief slowly turning into anger. You want to turn my pregnancy into a strategy? No, Ethan said firmly. I want to prevent it from destroying you. She shook her head. You already decided how this ends, did you not? Ethan did not deny it. I am offering you a solution. Silence pressed in on them again. Lily thought of her mother, of overdue bills, of the fragile life she had been holding together by sheer determination. She thought of the boardroom full of people who would not hesitate to tear her apart if they saw her as a liability. What kind of arrangement? She asked quietly. Ethan met her gaze. A legal marriage. The words landed heavily. A marriage in name only, he clarified quickly. Temporary, controlled. We would present a united front publicly. No interviews, no speculation. You would be protected. The child would have legitimacy. And once the situation stabilizes, we reassess. Reassess, Lily repeated. Yes. She let out a short laugh, sharp and humorless. You really think you can contract your way out of this? I think it is the only way to ensure you are not left alone to face this, Ethan said. Lily's voice trembled, despite her effort to keep it steady. And what about me, as a person, not as a risk factor? Ethan did not answer immediately. Then he said, Honestly, I do not know yet. That answer hurt more than a lie would have. You would be my wife on paper, he continued. You would keep your role private. No one needs to know how this began. I would provide full financial and legal protection, medical care, housing, security. You would not want for anything. Lily looked down at her hands. And love? Ethan shook his head once. This is not about love. She nodded slowly. Good. Because I do not want a child raised on a lie. This would not be a lie, Ethan said. It would be a shield. Lily closed her eyes. Every instinct in her told her to refuse, to walk away, even if it meant hardship. But then she imagined standing alone against headlines, lawyers, and public judgment. She imagined her child growing up under whispers and questions. When she opened her eyes again, her decision was already forming. If I agree, she said, her voice steady but firm, there will be conditions. Ethan inclined his head. I expected that. This is not ownership, Lily continued. You do not control my body, my time, or my voice. This ends when I say it ends. And if at any point I believe this harms my child, I walk away. Ethan considered her carefully. Then he nodded. Agreed. She exhaled. Then we will need it in writing. Of course, he said. Everything always is. They looked at each other, the weight of what they had just decided settling heavily between them. What began as a single night had become something far more dangerous, not because of love, but because they had just crossed the line between choice and obligation, and there was no turning back. The contract was drafted within 48 hours. Lily did not see Ethan during that time. After their conversation in the medical suite, everything moved quickly, but quietly, as if the decision they had made needed to be contained before either of them could reconsider it. A private driver took Lily from the office clinic to a short-term executive residence owned by the company. It was not extravagant, but it was secure, discreet, and far removed from the life she had been living in her small apartment. A doctor was assigned to her care. Groceries appeared without her asking. Her work schedule was cleared indefinitely under the explanation of medical leave. No one asked questions. No one dared to. On the third morning, Lily sat at the dining table in the residence, staring at a thick folder placed neatly in front of her. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, catching on the edge of the pages. The words on the cover were simple and unforgiving. Marital agreement. Ethan arrived precisely on time. He did not knock. He never needed to. He stepped inside, removed his coat, and placed it carefully over the back of a chair. For a moment, he simply looked at her, as if confirming she was still there. Still real. Good morning, he said. Lily nodded. Morning. He gestured toward the folder. Everything you asked for is in there. She opened it slowly. The terms were clear, almost brutally so. A legal marriage, registered quietly, with no public ceremony. A joint statement to be released at a later date, presenting their relationship as long-standing and private. Separate bedrooms, separate personal lives. No physical expectations, no emotional claims. There were clauses protecting her independence, clauses guaranteeing full medical care, financial security, and the right to terminate the agreement at her discretion, and one final clause, written plainly. The child will be acknowledged and protected without condition. Lily's throat tightened. "This is very thorough," she said. Ethan gave a small nod. "I do not leave room for ambiguity." She looked up at him. "And if I change my mind?" "Then we revisit it," he said. "Nothing here is meant to trap you." She studied his face, searching for arrogance, for calculation. She found only restraint. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. Ethan was silent for a moment. Then he answered honestly, "Because I will not allow my child to become collateral damage." Lily closed the folder. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, unaware of the agreement being forged inside this quiet room. There was no romance in the moment, no warmth, only the weight of consequences. She picked up the pen. "Before I sign this," Lily said, "there is something you need to understand." Ethan met her gaze. "This is not a performance for me. I will not smile on cue or play a role for cameras. If we are doing this, we do it with dignity, not lies piled on top of lies." Ethan nodded. "That is acceptable." "And one more thing," she added. "I am not grateful. I am agreeing because it protects my child, not because you saved me." Something flickered in Ethan's expression. Respect, perhaps. "Understood," he said. Lily signed. Ethan followed. The sound of pen against paper was soft, almost anticlimactic, but when it was done, the world had shifted. "You will move into the penthouse tonight," Ethan said. "It is easier to control access there." Lily stiffened. "Together? Under the same roof, yes, not the same space." She nodded slowly. "Publicly we will wait," Ethan continued. "The announcement comes after the board votes on the merger. Until then, this stays contained." "And at work?" Lily asked. "You will not return as my assistant," Ethan said. "That position no longer makes sense." "Then what am I?" she asked. "For now, private," he replied. "Protected." She leaned back in her chair, exhaustion finally settling into her bones. This was happening. All of it. A marriage without love. A future without certainty. As Ethan stood to leave, he paused. "This arrangement may have begun as necessity," he said, "but I will not treat it lightly." Lily did not respond, because somewhere deep inside her, beneath the fear and anger, another truth had begun to surface. This contract might define their roles, but it would not be enough to contain what came next. Life under the same roof began without ceremony. Lily moved into the penthouse late that evening, escorted through a private elevator that opened directly into a quiet, expansive space overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the living area, lights from the streets below tracing soft lines across the glass. Everything was immaculate, intentional, untouched. It did not feel like a home. A staff member showed her to a bedroom on the far side of the penthouse, tastefully furnished, neutral in color, prepared in advance. Fresh flowers sat on the nightstand. A handwritten note rested beside them. "If you need anything, ask. E." Lily set the note aside without comment. The first few days passed in careful silence. Ethan left early each morning, his routine precise as ever. Lily heard him moving in the distance, the low murmur of phone calls, the faint click of shoes against stone floors. When he returned late at night, she was usually already in her room, door closed, lights dimmed. They existed parallel to each other, and yet their lives were suddenly intertwined in ways neither could ignore. Publicly, things shifted quickly. Lily was introduced quietly to a stylist and a communications consultant, not for glamour, but for consistency. How she dressed, how she stood, how she entered a room beside Ethan without appearing uncertain or out of place. She learned when to speak and when silence carried more authority. At first, it felt like acting. Then something unexpected happened. At a charity luncheon, when a donor dismissed a junior staff member with thinly veiled condescension, Lily stepped in without hesitation. She redirected the conversation calmly, restoring dignity to the moment. Ethan noticed. So did others. Later, in the car, he said only one thing. "You handled that well." It was not praise, but it was acknowledgement. At home, the small moments accumulated. Ethan noticed that Lily ate slowly in the mornings, pushing food around her plate when nausea crept in. Without comment, he instructed the kitchen staff to adjust meals. Ginger tea appeared where coffee once stood. Lily noticed that Ethan worked late into the night, often standing at the window with his phone long after midnight. One evening, she left a blanket folded over the back of the chair near him. She did not say a word, neither did he. Their arrangement remained intact on paper. Separate rooms, separate lives, boundaries respected. But reality was less precise. One night, Lily woke from a sharp wave of dizziness and found herself sitting on the edge of the bed, struggling to breathe evenly. She did not intend to wake Ethan. But before she could decide what to do, he was there, standing in the doorway, concern evident despite his controlled tone. "Are you all right?" She nodded, embarrassed. "Just a moment." He stayed anyway. He did not touch her. He simply waited until the color returned to her face. When she lay back down, he turned off the light and closed the door quietly behind him. From that night on, something shifted. They began to share small conversations, nothing personal at first. Updates about schedules, board meetings, doctor appointments, but occasionally the walls thinned. One evening, as rain streaked down the windows, Lily mentioned her mother in passing, how she used to work 2 jobs and still find time to cook dinner every night. Ethan listened without interrupting. Another night, he spoke briefly about his father, about growing up learning that affection was conditional on success. Neither of them lingered on these confessions, but they mattered. Public appearances increased. They stood side by side at events, their presence calm and unified. Cameras flashed. Questions hovered but went unasked. Ethan's hand rested lightly at Lily's back when needed, not possessive but steady. People began to accept them, and that acceptance came with a cost. The more convincing they became, the more dangerous the illusion grew. Because somewhere between scheduled appearances and quiet evenings, between shared concern and unspoken understanding, the line they had drawn so carefully began to blur. Not because of desire, but because care had crept in where it was not supposed to exist. And neither Lily nor Ethan was ready to admit how difficult it was becoming to pretend otherwise. The first crack appeared at a board dinner. It was meant to be routine, a private evening at a members-only club overlooking the river, reserved for senior board members and their spouses. No press, no cameras, just quiet influence and carefully chosen words. Lily knew the rules by now. She wore a simple navy dress, nothing that drew attention, nothing that suggested ambition. Her hand rested lightly on Ethan's arm as they entered the room, her posture calm, her expression composed. To anyone watching, they looked settled, legitimate, too legitimate. That was what made it dangerous. The conversation flowed easily at first. Market forecasts, regulatory timelines, a few jokes at Ethan's expense about how marriage had finally slowed him down. Then Margaret Cole spoke. She was Ethan's aunt by marriage and a long-standing board member, known for her sharp instincts and her lack of patience for stories that did not add up. She smiled as she lifted her glass, her eyes never leaving Lily. "I must say," Margaret said lightly, "we were all quite surprised by the timing of your announcement." Lily felt Ethan's arm tense slightly beneath her fingers. "Surprised?" Lily repeated politely. "Yes," Margaret continued. "You and Ethan are both such private people, and yet suddenly married, with a child on the way. It makes one wonder how we all missed such an important relationship." A few heads turned. Interest sharpened. Ethan responded smoothly. "We chose to keep our personal life separate from the company." "Of course," Margaret said. "Still, it is remarkable. You were not seen together before. Not socially, not publicly. And Lily, you joined the company only months ago." The air shifted. Lily felt it immediately. The subtle change from curiosity to suspicion. Margaret leaned back in her chair. One could almost think this was convenient. Silence settled over the table. Ethan spoke, his voice even. "Are you implying something?" Margaret smiled. "I am simply saying that optics matter, especially now. Investors do not like surprises, and neither do boards." Lily understood then. This was not about concern, it was about control. That night, the questions did not stop. A board member's spouse asked Lily where she and Ethan had met. Another asked how long they had known each other before the marriage. Each question was polite, none were innocent. Lily answered carefully, keeping to the narrative they had agreed on. Private, quiet, personal, but doubt had already taken root. 2 days later, it escalated. An anonymous email circulated among senior staff and board members. No sender, no signature. Just a series of dates, timelines, and implications laid out with surgical precision. Lily's start date at the company, the night of a closed-door negotiation dinner, the estimated conception window. The suggestion was clear without being stated. She was not a wife. She was a liability. By the time Ethan read the email, the board was already calling for an emergency meeting. Lily found out an hour later, when security access to her temporary office was quietly revoked. No explanation, no confrontation, just exclusion. She stood in the hallway, staring at the red light on the access panel, her reflection staring back at her from the glass. This is how it ends, she thought. That evening, when Ethan returned to the penthouse, Lily was waiting for him in the living room. She did not raise her voice, she did not accuse. "I saw the email," she said. Ethan stopped short, his jaw tightened. "I was going to tell you." "You do not need to," Lily replied. "I understand." He moved closer. "This is not over." She shook her head. "It is exactly what we planned for, Ethan. The moment the story stopped being convenient." "That is not how I see it," he said. Lily stood. Her hands rested protectively over her abdomen. "This arrangement was meant to shield us, but now it is turning me into a bargaining chip." Ethan's voice hardened. "No one is bargaining with you." "They already are," she said quietly. "And I will not let my child grow up watching me be questioned, dissected, and erased." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I am stepping away." Ethan stared at her. "From what?" "From this," Lily said. "From the narrative, from the board, from you if I have to." The words landed harder than any accusation. "If you leave now," Ethan said, "the board will interpret it as confirmation." Lily met his gaze. "Then let them. I would rather walk away with my integrity than stay and lose myself piece by piece." She turned toward her room. Behind her, Ethan stood frozen, realizing too late that the greatest risk he faced was no longer the board. It was losing the one person he could not replace. And this time, there was no contract clause that could stop it. Ethan did not sleep that night. The penthouse was silent, but his mind was not. Lily's words replayed over and over, not as accusations, but as statements of fact. She was right. The board had already begun to treat her as expendable, as a variable to be managed. And by allowing that to happen, he had failed in the one responsibility that mattered most. By morning, the emergency board meeting had been scheduled. No delays, no excuses. Ethan arrived early. The boardroom was full when he entered. Faces turned toward him, some curious, some guarded, some already convinced they knew how this would end. Margaret Cole sat near the center, hands folded neatly, her expression unreadable. Ethan took his seat at the head of the table. Before anyone could speak, he stood. "There will be no discussion until I finish," he said calmly. The room stilled. "I am aware of the email circulating among you," Ethan continued. "I am aware of the questions being raised about my marriage, my personal life, and the assumptions being made about my wife." Margaret tilted her head. "Then perhaps you would like to clarify?" Ethan nodded. "I would." He placed a single document on the table, sliding it forward so that everyone could see. "This," he said, "is the marital agreement that has been referenced, speculated about, and mischaracterized." Several board members leaned in. "Yes," Ethan continued, "it exists. Yes, it was created to provide structure and protection. But what it is not is evidence of deception or manipulation. It was a private decision made to safeguard a family from public exploitation." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "A family formed under questionable circumstances." Ethan met her gaze without flinching. "A family formed under real ones." A murmur rippled through the room. "Let me be very clear," Ethan said. "Lily Hart is my wife, not a liability, not a distraction, and certainly not a bargaining chip. Any attempt to undermine her position or dignity is an attempt to undermine me." Silence fell, heavier this time. One board member cleared his throat. "Ethan, the concern is perception. Investors expect stability. Stability does not come from silence or cowardice," Ethan replied. "It comes from accountability." He paused, then added, "and from honesty." He reached down and picked up the document again. "This agreement," he said, "no longer serves its purpose." And with that, he tore it in half. Gasps echoed around the table. Ethan placed the torn pages on the polished wood. "I am voiding it, effective immediately." Margaret stood abruptly. "You cannot simply—" "I can," Ethan said evenly, And I have. He looked around the table. If this board believes that my commitment to my family compromises my leadership, then you are free to call a vote of no confidence. But understand this, I will not separate my integrity from this company. Not now, not ever. No one spoke. Minutes passed. Finally, a senior board member leaned back and said quietly, "This is not what we expected." Ethan nodded. "It is what I chose." When the meeting ended, there was no applause, no resolution, but there was something else. Respect. Ethan left the building without waiting for commentary. He drove straight to the penthouse. Lily was already packing. A suitcase lay open on the bed, half filled. She froze when she saw him standing in the doorway. "You should not be here," she said softly. Ethan crossed the room and set something on the table between them. The torn contract. "It is over," he said. She stared at it, confusion flickering across her face. "I stood in front of the board," Ethan continued. "I told them everything that mattered, and I made one thing clear. You are not leaving. Not because of pressure, not because of fear, and not because I failed to choose you." Lily's voice shook. "You do not get to decide that." "No," Ethan said gently, "but I do get to decide whether I hide behind paperwork or stand where I belong." She looked at him, searching his face. "This is not about obligation," he said. "This is about responsibility, and something else I did not expect." He hesitated, then spoke the truth. "I care." The words were simple, unpolished, real. Lily closed her eyes, her hand instinctively resting on her abdomen. For the first time since this began, the future felt uncertain in a different way, not because of fear, but because of choice. And this time, whatever came next would be real. The wedding was small. There were no reporters, no flashing cameras, no carefully staged headlines. Just a quiet ceremony held on a clear Saturday morning at a private garden on the outskirts of the city. A place chosen not for appearances, but for peace. Lily stood beneath an arch of white flowers, her hands steady despite the weight of the months behind her. The pregnancy showed now, gently rounding her frame, no longer something to hide or explain. She wore a simple dress, unadorned, chosen by no one but herself. Ethan waited a few steps away, not as a chief executive officer, not as a man making a statement, just as someone who had chosen to be there. When Lily walked toward him, there was no rush, no performance. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the past fell away. The contracts, the strategies, the carefully constructed distance. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Ethan spoke first. "I promise to choose you when it is easy, and when it is not. I promise to protect our family not with silence, but with honesty. And I promise that our child will never doubt that they were wanted." Lily's voice did not shake when she spoke. "I promise to stand beside you, not behind you, to tell you the truth, even when it is uncomfortable, and to build a home where love is not conditional on success." When the officiant pronounced them married, there was no applause, only quiet smiles, quiet understanding. That afternoon, life continued. The board did not remove Ethan. Investors did not flee. In fact, something unexpected happened. Trust stabilized. The market responded not to scandal, but to clarity. For the first time in years, Ethan led without hiding any part of himself. Lily did not return to her old role. She did not disappear either. She chose her own pace, her own space. Mornings filled with doctor appointments and slow walks. Afternoons spent planning not a public image, but a future. They argued sometimes, about trivial things, about serious ones, but never about whether they belonged in each other's lives. That question had already been answered. Months later, on a quiet night, Lily went into labor. The hospital room was dim, the city lights glowing beyond the window. Ethan sat beside her, holding her hand, his composure stripped away by something far more powerful than control. When the doctor placed their child in Lily's arms, time seemed to pause. A daughter, small, perfect, real. Ethan's breath caught as he touched her tiny fingers. For the first time in his life, the future was not something to be managed. It was something to be held. Later, when the room was quiet again, Ethan leaned down and kissed Lily's forehead. "Thank you," he said, "for not letting me hide." Lily smiled, tired but content. "Thank you for choosing to stand." Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the transformation that had taken place inside one small room. What began as an arrangement had become a family, not because it was planned, but because, when it mattered most, they chose honesty over fear, responsibility over image, and love over control. And that made all the difference.